He said it on a Wednesday afternoon in late November. He used the careful voice he uses when his wife has told him what to say. By Christmas morning, the words immediate family meant something different in our family than they had 4 weeks earlier. And the gift I had been planning to give my son and his wife for 10 years had been given, instead, to the only person at the table who had asked the right question. Here is what actually happened. My name is Barbara. I am 71 years old. My husband Bill died in 2019. We had been married for 44 years. Bill had been a high school math teacher for 36 of those years. He had retired in 2014. He had died in 2019, 5 months after his diagnosis. He had left me a paid-off 3-bedroom ranch house on a quiet street in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. He had left me a small pension. He had left me a modest investment account he had built carefully across 40 years. He had left me, in a sealed envelope in his desk drawer, a letter I would not open until November of 2024. I will tell you about the letter in a few minutes. First, I want to tell you about the phone call. My son David is 46. He is married to a woman named Megan. They have one child, my granddaughter Sophie, who is 14. David is the regional manager of a logistics company in Columbus. Megan is a real estate agent. They live in a 4-bedroom colonial in a development called Stonewood Crossing, about 20 minutes from my house. They make, by my estimate, somewhere around $200,000 a year combined. They are not poor, they are not struggling. They are, however, the kind of family that always seems to have a reason to skip the small expense and let someone else pick it up. The dinner check at the restaurant, the grocery run before the cookout, the Christmas tree, the car repair for Sophie's first car when she got it last summer, which I had paid for $1,100 at a shop in town, because David had said, "Mom, things are tight right now, we'll catch up with you later." They had not caught up with me. I had not pressed. I had been their mother and grandmother for 14 years of Sophie's life and 46 years of David's. I had stopped, somewhere along the way, expecting to be paid back for the small things. I had not yet stopped expecting to be included. That had been my mistake. I want to tell you about my sister, Carol. Carol is 68. She is my younger sister by 3 years. She and her husband Tom live in a small house 12 minutes from mine. They have been married for 41 years. They have no children. They had wanted children. It had not happened. They had made their peace with it sometime in the early 1990s and had built a life around each other, around their small circle of friends, and around being the doting aunt and uncle to my son David from the moment he was born in 1978. Carol had been at the hospital the day David was born. She had held him at 6 minutes old. She had babysat him every Friday night for the first 6 years of his life, so that Bill and I could have date night. She had attended every school play, every basketball game, every graduation, every birthday party, from the time David was 1 until the time he turned 18. She had been, in every sense that mattered, to me and to Bill, our son's second mother. She had cried at his wedding in 2008. She had been at the hospital when Sophie was born in 2010. She had babysat Sophie too, not as often, because Megan had her own family, who did most of the babysitting, but enough. Enough that Sophie called her Aunt Carol with the same warmth a 14-year-old gives to people who have been in her life since the day she was born. In June of 2024, Carol's husband Tom had died. He had been 70. He had had a heart attack on a Saturday morning in his garden. He had been dead before the ambulance arrived. I had driven over to Carol's house at 8:45 a.m. on the day Tom died. I had stayed with her for 9 days. I had slept in their guest room. I had made her toast. I had answered the phone. I had helped her write the obituary. I had stood beside her at the funeral. I had watched her, in the months that followed, become a different person. The 41 years of marriage had ended in a single morning. She had not yet, by November of 2024, fully come out the other side. She had lost 12 pounds without trying. She had stopped going to her book club. She had been on the last few visits to my house, more quiet than she had been at any point in our 68 years as sisters. I had been making sure to invite Carol to everything since June. I had invited her to my 4th of July cookout. I had invited her to my Labor Day cookout. I had invited her to Thanksgiving dinner at my house in November. She had come to all three. She had been quiet at all three. I had been planning, in November of 2024, to invite her to Christmas dinner at David and Megan's house, because that was where Christmas dinner had been hosted every year since 2018, after David and Megan had finished their colonial in Stonewood Crossing and decided that hosting Christmas was easier with the kid. I had been planning to call David in late November to confirm Carol's place at the Christmas table. The call had not gone the way I had expected. I called David on a Wednesday afternoon in late November, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It was about 3 p.m. I had just finished writing my Christmas card list at the kitchen table. David picked up on the third ring. He sounded like he was in his car. I said, "Sweetheart, quick question. For Christmas dinner this year, Carol, she has been having such a hard time since Tom died. I want to make sure she has somewhere to go on Christmas Day. I was thinking, I will pick her up that morning, bring her with me to your house. She will sit at the table with us, and I will drive her home that evening. Is that all right?" A pause. He said, "Mom, hold on, let me pull over." He pulled over. I heard the car stop. He said, "Mom, listen. Megan and I have been talking about Christmas, about how we want it to be this year. And we were going to call you this week. We have been thinking, Mom, this year we want to keep Christmas small. Just immediate family. Just me and Megan and Sophie. And you, obviously. But just immediate family this year. No extended relatives. We want Sophie to have, a more focused Christmas. Just the four of us." I had not said anything for a moment. I had been holding my Christmas card list in my hand. I had been planning to write Carol's name on it. I said, "Sweetheart, Carol is not extended family. Carol is my sister. She has been at our family Christmases since you were born." He said, "Mom, I know. But listen, this year Megan and I have been talking, Mom. Megan made a point that Carol is not, technically, immediate family. She is your sister, which makes her my aunt. But Mom, Megan said that for Sophie's sake, Sophie is 14 now, she is going to be in high school next year. Megan said that for Sophie, the Christmas memories that are going to matter are the small, focused ones, the ones with just the immediate family. And Mum, Megan said that having Aunt Carol there this year, with her grief, with how quiet she has been, Megan said it might bring down the mood for Sophie. That this is Sophie's last year of middle school, that she should have a Christmas she remembers as joyful, not somber." He stopped. He waited. I noticed several things in the pause. I noticed that David had referred to Carol 3 times in 20 seconds as Aunt Carol, which was the phrasing Megan had clearly used in the conversation he was relaying to me, and which was not the phrasing David himself would have used if he had been speaking without his wife's script in his head. I noticed that he had said, Megan said, 3 times in the same 20 seconds. I noticed that he had said, immediate family, twice, which was the phrase Megan had clearly decided would be the official framing of the exclusion, and which David was now using to deliver the message his wife had decided to send. I noticed that the central concern in the conversation, as David had presented it, was Sophie's joyful Christmas, which was the kind of framing Megan used when she had decided to exclude someone for a reason that was actually about her own preferences and needed to be repositioned as a kindness to someone else. I noticed that the woman being excluded, my sister, my widowed sister, my sister who had cried into a couch cushion at her own kitchen table on the morning of June 15th and asked me how she was supposed to live the rest of her life alone, had been described in this phone call, as someone whose grief would bring down the mood. I noticed all of it. I sat at my kitchen table. I looked at the Christmas card list on the table in front of me. Carol's name was not yet on it. I picked up the pen. I wrote her name down. I said, very calmly, "David, let me think about this. I will call you back tomorrow." He said, "Mom, I knew you would understand. Megan was. Megan was worried you would be upset. I told her you would understand. Thank you, Mom. I love you." I said, "I love you too, sweetheart." We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I did not cry. I thought about Bill. Bill had been a math teacher. Bill had also been the kind of man who, when something was wrong in our family, would sit at the kitchen table and write down the facts on a piece of paper. I picked up another piece of paper. I began writing down what David had just said. I wrote, "David, Nov, 27, 3:14 p.m., said, Megan said. Said, immediate family twice. Said, Aunt Carol 3 times. Said Carol's grief would bring down the mood for Sophie's joyful Christmas. Said Sophie's middle school Christmas memories should be focused." I underlined should be focused. I sat at the kitchen table with the paper in my hand. I thought about Carol. I thought about Tom in the garden. I thought about the 9 days I had slept in Carol's guest room in June. I thought about the fact that David, who had been held by Carol at 6 minutes old, had just told me that Carol's presence at his Christmas dinner would bring down the mood. I picked up the phone. I called my lawyer. "I want to pause here and ask you something honestly. If your son had called you and told you, in the voice his wife had clearly given him, that your widowed sister, the one who had been at the hospital when he was born, the one who had babysat him every Friday night for the first 6 years of his life, the one who had held his daughter at the maternity ward in 2010, was not welcome at his Christmas table because her grief would bring down the mood for his middle school daughter, what would you have done in the next 10 minutes? I think a lot of mothers would have called their daughter-in-law and asked her to explain. I think some would have called their son back and said the words they had not been able to say the first time. I think a brave handful would have walked into the next family event and announced, in front of everyone, that Carol would be at Christmas dinner, whether anyone liked it or not. I did none of those 3 things. I want to tell you why. I had been a mother for 46 years. I had been a sister for 68 years. I had been Bill's wife for 44. I had been a widow for 5.5. In all of those roles, I had learned one thing about family confrontations, the same thing Bill had taught me, slowly, across 44 years of marriage. The thing he had taught me was this: family confrontations do not produce family change, they produce family arguments. The arguments end, everyone goes home. Everyone tells themselves a story about what the argument was about. The underlying behavior continues, usually in a slightly more careful form, because everyone has learned what not to say out loud. I did not want a family argument. I wanted a family change. The change was not going to come from a phone call. The change was going to come from somewhere else. It was going to come from a letter Bill had left me in November of 2019, 11 months after his death. I had not yet opened the letter. I had been carrying it in my desk drawer for 5 years. The envelope had been sealed with a small piece of red tape. On the front, in Bill's handwriting, it had said, "Barbara, for the day someone in our family decides who belongs and who does not." I had not opened it for 5 years because the day had not come. The day had come on a Wednesday afternoon in late November of 2024 at 3:14 p.m. It was 3:32 by the time I picked up the phone to call my lawyer. It was 3:33 when I walked to Bill's old desk in the spare bedroom. It was 3:34 when I opened the drawer. It was 3:35 when I broke the seal. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten on yellow legal pad paper. Bill had written it in February of 2019, 3 months before he died. I read, "Barbara, if you are reading this, Something has happened in our family that I have been worried about for 10 years and have not known how to tell you. I am sorry I am not there to help you with it. I have been watching Megan for 10 years, since the wedding in 2008. I have watched her, very slowly, decide who was important and who was not. She did it with my brother Howard. When he was alive, she would invite him to one event and not the next, and the next event after that would be one Howard wasn't expected at. And after 3 or 4 cycles, Howard had stopped expecting to be invited. He died in 2014, still not understanding why he had drifted out of our family Christmases. I had understood. I had not been able to fix it. I am sorry I did not try harder, Barbara. I had not yet learned what I am about to tell you. I have also watched Megan, very slowly, decide that Carol was an obligation, not a person. She has been polite to Carol for 16 years. Polite, not warm. She has invited Carol to events when David has pushed her to. She has not invited Carol to events when David has not pushed. Barbara. Tom died in June of this year. Megan and David came to the funeral. They were polite at the funeral. I noticed, at the reception afterward, that Megan kept Sophie away from Carol the entire afternoon. Sophie wanted to sit with Carol. Megan kept finding reasons to move Sophie to a different table. Barbara. I am writing this letter because I think I am almost certain that sometime in the next year or two, Megan will decide that Carol is not welcome at our family Christmas. She will not say it to you directly. She will have David say it. David will say it in the language of immediate family. That phrase is one of Megan's favorites. She uses it when she wants to make an exclusion sound legitimate. Barbara. On the day David tells you that Carol is not welcome at Christmas, the day has come. The day I have been worried about. I am sorry I am not there to help you with it. I have left you something. 2 things, actually. The first is in the safe deposit box at our bank. The combination is taped to the inside cover of our 1992 photo album in the bookshelf in the living room. The second is the name of a lawyer. Her name is Helen Roth. She has my full instructions. She has been holding a folder of documents for me since February of 2019. I paid her in advance. She will know what to do when you call her. Barbara, I want to tell you what is in the folder. 3 things. First, a small irrevocable trust restructuring. The house and the investment account will be moved into a trust with Sophie as the beneficiary. Sophie will inherit them in trust at the age of 25. The trust skips David and Megan. They will not be in the trust. They will not be able to reach it. Second, a small life insurance policy I took out in February of 2019 with Carol as the beneficiary. $200,000. Carol does not yet know about it. I had been paying the premium for 60 months. The policy is fully paid up. Carol will receive it on my death, which she would have, except that I asked Helen to hold the notification until the day you contacted her. I asked Helen to hold it, because I wanted you to be the one to give it to Carol. I wanted Carol to receive it from you, not from a stranger at an insurance office. I wanted the gift to come from our family, not from a policy number on a piece of paper. Third, a letter from me to Carol, sealed, which Helen will give to you to give to her. The letter is short, it explains. I would like Carol to receive the letter the same day she receives the news of the life insurance. I would like you to deliver both at the same time, in person, at Carol's kitchen table with a cup of tea. Barbara. Carol has been our family for 68 years. She held David at 6 minutes old. She held Sophie at 6 hours old. She was at our wedding in 1975. She was at my funeral in 2019. She is family. She is more family than the people who have decided to redefine the word. Christmas this year, whatever year this is when you are reading it, please do not go to David and Megan's house. Please host Christmas at our own house. Invite Carol. Invite anyone else who has been quietly redefined out of David and Megan's vocabulary. Cook the ham the way I always made it. Use my mother's china. Tell Sophie, if she ends up there, that her great-aunt Carol is the person who held her at 6 hours old. Sophie is 14. She is old enough to know who held her. She is old enough to know who has been left out. I love you. Bill. I read the letter twice. I did not cry. I sat at Bill's old desk with the letter in my lap for a long time. The November light was coming in through the window above the desk. It was a soft, cold light. The kind of light Ohio gets in late November, when the trees have just gone bare, and the first frost is a few weeks away. I sat in the light. I thought about Bill. I thought about how he had known, in February of 2019, that his wife's sister would one day be excluded from their family's Christmas table by their daughter-in-law's word, immediate. He had known. He had prepared. I stood up. I went back to the kitchen. I picked up the phone. I called Helen Roth. Helen picked up on the second ring. I said, "Helen Roth, this is Barbara Whitlow. My husband Bill Whitlow asked you to be ready for my phone call. I am calling now." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Barbara, I have been waiting for 5 years and 9 months. I will be at your house tomorrow morning at 9. Will you be home?" I said, "I will be home." We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table. It was 3:56 p.m. I made myself a cup of tea. I called David back at 4:15. I said, "Sweetheart, about Christmas. I have decided to host Christmas at my house this year. Just me, not at your house. I would like you and Megan and Sophie to come to my house instead. I will cook the ham the way your father used to make it. I will use my mother's china. Carol will be there. So will I. So will you and Megan and Sophie, if you can come. Christmas Day, 3 p.m., my house. I hope you can make it." There was a long silence. He said, "Mom, what you want to host Christmas? At your house?" I said, "Yes, sweetheart. I have been hosting Christmases at my house since 1977. It has been a while since I have done it. I would like to do it again this year." He said, "Mom, but Megan and we have been hosting at our house since 2018. I said, "Sweetheart, you and Megan have been hosting at your house since 2018, which has been wonderful. I am grateful for those 6 years. This year, I am hosting at my house. You are very welcome to attend. Carol will be there. So will I. The invitation is open. If you cannot make it, I will understand. If you can, I will be very glad to have you." He said, "Mom, let me talk to Megan." I said, "Sweetheart, of course. Please call me back by Friday so I know how many places to set." We hung up. I made another cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table. I had not yet, at this point, told Carol anything. I would tell Carol the next day, after Helen arrived. Helen Roth arrived at my house at 8:58 on Thursday morning. She brought a leather portfolio. She brought a notary in her car. We sat at my kitchen table. She brought out 3 documents. We worked at the kitchen table for 2 hours. I signed the trust restructuring, moving the house and the investment account into a trust for Sophie, accessible at 25. I signed the activation of the life insurance distribution to Carol, $200,000, to be wired to Carol's bank account within 10 business days of the activation. I signed the certification of receipt of Bill's letter to Carol, which Helen handed to me sealed in a small cream envelope. The notary stamped each document. By 11 a.m. on Thursday, the house was in trust for Sophie. Carol's $200,000 had been activated. The letter was in my purse. I called Carol at 11:45. I said, "Carol, can I come over for tea this afternoon? Around 2? She said, "Of course, sweetheart. I will make tea." I drove to Carol's house. I arrived at 1:57. She opened the door. She was in her grey cardigan, the one she had worn most days since June. She hugged me at the door. She walked me into the kitchen. She poured tea. We sat at her kitchen table. I said, "Carol, I want to tell you two things." She said, "Okay." I said, "First, Christmas this year. I am hosting at my house, not at David and Megan's. I want you to come. I want you at the table. I am cooking the ham the way Bill used to make it. I am using Mom's china, Christmas Day, 3 p.m., my house." She blinked. She said, "Barbara, but you always go to David's." I said, "Carol, not this year. This year I am hosting. You will be there." She said, "Sweetheart, Barbara, I don't want to be in the way. I know David and Megan, they have their own." I said, "Carol, you are not in the way. You have never been in the way of anything. You are my sister. You are family. You will be at Christmas dinner." She nodded. She started to cry, very softly. I let her cry. I waited. After a while, I said, "Carol, there is a second thing." She looked up. I said, "Bill left you something. In February of 2019, 3 months before he died. He bought a life insurance policy. He named you the beneficiary. He paid the premiums in advance for 60 months. The policy is fully paid. The amount is $200,000. It will be wired to your bank account in the next 10 business days." She stared at me. She said, "Barbara, what?" I said, "Bill set it up in 2019. He had been planning it. He left a letter for you. I have the letter in my purse. He asked me to give it to you in person, with a cup of tea, at your kitchen table." I reached into my purse. I took out the cream envelope. I handed it to her. Her hands were shaking. She broke the seal. She read it slowly. I did not read over her shoulder. I sat and drank my tea. When she had finished, she set the letter on the table. She looked at me. She said, "Barbara, he wrote this for me. In 2019, before he died." I said, "He did, Carol." She said, "Barbara, what does it say?" I said, "Sweetheart, the letter is yours. I have not read it. He wrote it for you. It is between him and you." She said, "Barbara, will you read it with me?" I said, "Yes, sweetheart, I will." She slid the letter across the table. I read, "Carol, if you are reading this, I have been gone for some time, and Barbara has just told you about the policy. I want you to know 3 things. First, the money is yours, not Tom's, not the family's, yours. Use it for whatever you want. Travel, a new car, a donation in Tom's name, coffee with friends, books. I do not have an opinion about how you spend it. I have an opinion only that you spend it for yourself, not for anyone else. Second, I want to tell you why I bought the policy. I bought it because, in the fall of 2018, when I knew my body was tired, I started thinking about who in our family had been the most consistent across the most years. The answer was you. You were at the hospital when David was born. You held David at 6 minutes old. You held Sophie at 6 hours old. You attended every birthday party from 1979 to 1996. You came to my retirement dinner in 2014. You came to my hospital room in 2019. You are family. You are more family, in many ways, than family. Third, Tom is going to die before you do. I am sorry to tell you that in writing. I do not know when. I do not know how. I have the sense, watching him over the last few years, that his heart is tired. He has not said anything to me. I have not said anything to him. I am telling you now because I want you to know that whenever it happens, I knew it was coming, and I prepared this small thing so that you would not be alone in it. The money is for you to have a friend when Tom is gone. The friend can be Barbara. The friend can be travel. The friend can be a small charity in Tom's name. The friend is whatever you decide. I bought you a friend. I love you, Carol. You were the best sister-in-law a man could have had. I am sorry I cannot tell you in person. Bill. I had read the letter aloud. Carol was sobbing now. I let her sob. I reached across the table and held her hand. After a long time, she said, Barbara, he knew about Tom's heart. I said, he worried, Carol. He did not know. He worried. She said, Barbara, $200,000. I said, yes, Carol. She said, Barbara, I don't. What do I? I said, sweetheart, you do not have to decide anything today. The money will be in your bank account in 10 business days. You will decide over the next year or two what to do with it. You do not have to decide right now. The only thing you have to do today is finish your tea, accept the gift, and come to my house for Christmas dinner. She nodded. She said, yes, Barbara, I will come to Christmas dinner. I said, good. Carol, there is one more small thing. She said, yes? I said, David and Megan may or may not come to my Christmas dinner. They told me on Wednesday that they wanted Christmas to be immediate, family, only. That phrase was their phrase for not inviting you. I am not certain whether, when they hear that I am hosting and that you will be there, they will come. They may not. I want you to know, before Christmas, that the table will be set whether they come or not. The four of us, you, me, Sophie, if she comes, and the empty chair Bill always sat in, will have Christmas dinner. That is the table I am preparing. She nodded. She said, Barbara, I love you. I said, I love you too, sweetheart. I drove home. I waited for David's call. David called me on Friday evening at 6 p.m. He sounded tired. He said, Mom, Megan and I have been talking about Christmas, about you hosting. We have decided we will come. I said, I am glad, sweetheart. He said, Mom, Megan wants me to ask you something. She wants me to ask whether Carol has to be there. I said, yes, sweetheart, Carol will be there. He said, Mom, Megan asked if Carol could come for dessert or for a short visit before dinner, so that the dinner itself could be just the four of us. She said it would be a compromise. I said, sweetheart, the compromise is no. He said, Mom. I said, David, listen to me. Carol will be at the table from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Christmas Day, the same as everyone else. She will not be served dessert separately. She will not be visited briefly before dinner. She will eat the ham and the green beans and the potatoes at the same time as everyone else. She will sit across from me. She will sit beside the empty chair where your father used to sit. If you and Megan can come on those terms, you will be welcome. If you and Megan cannot come on those terms, I will understand, and we will see each other in the new year. A long silence. He said, Mom, we will come, on those terms. I said, good, Christmas Day, 3 p.m. Bring Sophie. I will set 5 places. We hung up. I poured myself a glass of wine. I went to bed at 10. I slept the way a woman sleeps when she has, for the first time in 5.5 years, decided where Christmas would be held. Christmas Day arrived. Carol came over at 1 p.m. She helped me set the table. We used my mother's china, the white set with the small blue flowers around the rim, which had been her grandmother's before that. We used the crystal glasses Bill and I had bought on our honeymoon in 1975. We used the cloth napkins my mother had embroidered for our wedding. Carol cried a little, twice, while we were setting the table. I let her cry. David, Megan, and Sophie arrived at 2:55. Megan was wearing a soft red sweater and the small bright smile she uses when she has lost an argument and is preparing to perform graciousness about it. She hugged me at the door. She hugged Carol at the door. The hug to Carol was the smallest I have ever seen Megan give a person at a holiday. It lasted, by my count, 2 seconds. Carol returned the hug warmly. Sophie came in last. Sophie was 14. She had been growing fast that year. She was almost as tall as I was. She was wearing a new green sweater her mother had clearly bought for the occasion. She saw Carol. Her face broke into a smile. She walked across the room. She said, "Aunt Carol!" She hugged Carol for a long time. She said, into Carol's shoulder, "Aunt Carol, I am so glad you are here. I missed you." I noticed Megan's face. Megan's face did the small, careful thing it does when something is not going to her plan. I did not say anything. I let the hug happen. We sat down at 5 places at the dinner table at 3:15. I had set a 6th place for Bill, his usual seat at the head, empty, with my mother's china and a glass of red wine that I would drink myself at the end of the meal, the way I had done at every family meal since 2019. We ate. The ham was good. The conversation was careful but warm. Sophie sat next to Carol. They talked about the school play Sophie was in. They talked about a book Carol had given Sophie 3 years ago that Sophie had reread twice. Sophie asked Carol whether she remembered the song they used to sing in the car when Carol drove her to ballet practice, when Sophie was 7. Carol remembered. They sang 2 lines of it at the table. Megan smiled at all of it. The smile did not, by my measurement, reach her eyes. I did not push her. I let her smile. At 5:45 p.m., during dessert, I stood up. I tapped my water glass with my knife. The table went quiet. I said, "Before we move to the living room, I want to say a few things briefly." I looked at the table. I looked at Sophie, then Carol, then David, then Megan, then Bill's empty chair. I said, "Yesterday morning, my lawyer Helen Roth came to my house. I signed 3 documents. The first transferred this house, into an irrevocable trust. Sophie is the beneficiary. She will inherit it, in trust, when she turns 25. The trust skips David and Megan. They are not in it. They will not be in it. I tell you this not to surprise you on Christmas Day. I tell you because Sophie is 14, and old enough to know what is coming to her, and old enough to know why. Sophie, sweetheart, this is the house your grandmother and grandfather lived in for 47 years. It will, eventually, be yours. You will know what to do with it. I trust you." Sophie looked at me. Her eyes were wide. She nodded slowly. She did not speak. I said, "The second document transferred $200,000 to your great-aunt Carol. Your grandfather Bill set up an insurance policy in February of 2019, 3 months before he died. He named Carol the beneficiary. He paid the premiums in advance. The money was wired to her account this week. Carol did not know about it until Thursday afternoon at her kitchen table. Carol was crying quietly. I continued, "The third document is in my purse. It is a sealed letter your grandfather wrote to me in February of 2019. The letter explained everything I have just told you. I do not need to read it tonight. I will let it stay in my purse. It is between him and me, and I want to keep it that way." I looked at David. I looked at Megan. I said, "David, Megan, I love you both. I will continue to love you both. The relationship between us will continue. There are some things going forward that will be different." I said, "David. Your phone call on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, when you told me that Carol was not welcome at your Christmas dinner because her grief might bring down the mood for Sophie's last. Middle school Christmas, that phone call was the phone call I had been waiting, without knowing I had been waiting, for 5.5 years. Your father had been waiting for it longer than that. He left me a letter explaining what to do on the day it came. The letter has been in my desk drawer since November of 2019. I opened it on Wednesday afternoon at 3:35 p.m., 21 minutes after we hung up. I said, "Megan." The phrase, "immediate family," which I understand was your phrase, is not a phrase that means what you have been using it to mean. Immediate family in our family means everyone at this table, plus the empty chair where Bill is sitting tonight. It does not exclude my sister. It will not exclude my sister. As long as I am alive, immediate family at any holiday in our family will include the people who have been at the table for 68 years, regardless of their genetic relationship to the table's host. I said, "That is all I have to say tonight. The ham was good, the dessert was good. Carol, sweetheart, would you help me clear the plates?" The table sat in silence for a long moment. Then Carol stood up. She walked around to my side of the table. She helped me clear the plates. Sophie stood up and helped us. David and Megan sat at the table for another 4 minutes. Then they stood up. Then they helped too. We moved to the living room for coffee. It was the strangest, quietest, most honest Christmas dinner I had hosted in 20 years. It was also the best one. David called me on the 27th. He said he wanted to come over alone. He came over at 4 p.m. We sat at the kitchen table. He said, "Mom, I am sorry." I said, "Sweetheart, I know." He said, "Mom, Megan is. Megan is angry. She is Mom." She said she felt humiliated at the table. She said you did not have to say all of that in front of her. I said, "Sweetheart, I did have to say all of it in front of her. The truth that is said only in private is the truth that gets renegotiated in private. The truth that is said in front of witnesses is the truth that stays said." He nodded. He said, "Mom, what about us?" I said, "Sweetheart, you and I will have lunch on the first Saturday of every month, alone, at this kitchen table. For 1 year. After that year, we will see what we have to talk about that is not about the things that happened in November and December. I love you. I will love you for the rest of my life." The lunches start in January. He said, "Mom, thank you." He hugged me at the door. He left. I have had lunch with him on the first Saturday of every month for 14 months now. The lunches have been good. He has, slowly, begun to use the phrase "we have enough." I have not corrected him when he uses it. I have simply noticed. That night I sat in Bill's reading chair in the living room with the small notebook I had begun keeping the morning after the phone call, and I wrote one line. My son said Christmas is for immediate family. So by Christmas morning, the word immediate had been rewritten by a husband who saw it coming 5 years before I did, and who left me, at his desk, the small, careful tools to host the Christmas he wanted his sister-in-law to have. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives at a kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon, with a cup of tea and a sealed letter, between two sisters who have been each other's family for 68 years. I closed the notebook. The ham had been good. The china was washed. Carol was at home, 12 minutes away, with $200,000 in her bank account and Bill's letter on her bedside table. The chair where Bill used to sit was empty, but the table around it had been, on Christmas Day of 2024, the way Bill had wanted it to be. That had been, in the end, enough.